evolving as a species, we are evolving as a race, we are evolving as a being, we are evolving as a universe. This is a moment of learning. It's like breaking through an old shell into a new shell. So allow yourself to break through, even if it's painful. Allow yourself to break through focused and knowing that this is part of growth. We are becoming enlightened, we are becoming aware. Be strong, be in your heart, be of vision, do not be afraid, and I will see you somewhere, sometime. I wish you well.
Tonight on Darkcity, I am a very lucky boy. I've got the one and the only Rob Mernard. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Dom. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No problems, Rob. It's definitely my pleasure. For those that don't know, and many do know exactly who Rob is, Rob's a comedian who's made many documentaries that have woken up many people to, as the way I see it, is how the legal system has enslaved us. Rob, would you like to explain why you got into this and take it from the top?
I'm a shit disturber, Dom. I don't know if I can say that on the air.
You can say whatever you like.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a shit disturber. It's my nature. I suffered an injustice, the details of which I don't want to go into, at the hands of the courts, and I started doing some research, and the more I researched, the more I found out that they were using an extensive amount of deception and relying on ignorance in order to secure their authority, and that they had far less authority than most people assume and believe.
In what sort of way? How do they manage to do this en masse to the people?
Well, for instance, they might tell you that you must fill out this form. And our belief is that it's the government, they're the government, and when they say you must fill out the form, that we have an existing obligation to do so. But what they're actually doing is they're just people offering services, and when they say you must fill out this form, they aren't yet the government, and it's by filling out that form that you then create a trust or transfer authority to them, and it's by this function that they end up becoming the authority in your life. The other deception that they use, if you think about it, they consider themselves to be public servants, and yet they dictate to us. So if they're public servants, then either the servant is the master, in which case they shouldn't talk to us like they do, or they have used some sort of deception to get us to abandon the position of master in favor of the position of a ward of the state, where like a nanny is a servant, but she has authority over the children. And if she is dealing with an adult who is incompetent, then she would also have authority over that one. So they use legal trickery to get us to abandon our true position as masters over our servants in exchange for a much lower status that exists below them, in exchange for their benefits and the privileges that they want to provide us with, like the dole, as you guys would call it.
Yeah, the benefit system.
Yeah, and my question has always been, not always, I used to wonder if Batman was real, but my question is, if we are expected to give up certain rights and freedoms in exchange for certain societal benefits, if we don't know what we gave up in that exchange, how can we refer to what we received as a benefit? You wouldn't go buy a car, not know what you paid for it, and then run around saying, oh, I got a great deal.
But when you buy a car, is it yours anyway?
I would believe so. When you buy a car and it's yours prior to the registration, but then after with the registration, although technically it's still yours, you're signing over a certain amount of interest and control to the party that you're registering with. It goes back, from my research, what I found is that it went back to long ago when ships would come into port. And it even happens now. The ship's captain is not the owner of the vessel, but they have to sign over that ship and all chattel contents to the harbor master in order to come into the harbor, at which point in time the harbor master becomes liable for them. He's still not the owner, and nor is he the captain, but amongst all of them, he has more authority when that ship is in their harbor. And that is kind of what they're doing with us. They secure authority over us instead of, inviting us into their harbors and then claim, okay, it's your ship, you own it, but we're in charge of you and you have to do what we say.
So what they're doing is with this name that they create upon the birth
They don't
is,
create it.
or in the
Your
usage of
parents do.
words.
There,
Well,
there
well,
is. Go ahead. Sorry.
your parents they register this name, and then the government expects you to keep using this name because then it profits for them, really.
Yeah.
And
Well, your parents have asked them to take care of you and all of your wealth. And in Canada, if we're all owners of the country, we're all incredibly rich, and we transfer this wealth by way of a trust to the trustees, and then they're supposed to give us our dividends and provide the wealth for us from that. But what they're doing is they're putting it in their own pockets and their friends' pockets, and they're doing things with our money and our resources that no one in Canada really wants. I mean, I have never met anyone in Canada who supported the idea of giving money to go drop bombs on people we never met in Afghanistan or now Mali or whatever. I mean, that's not what the Canadian people want.
well, who does? That's just exactly what governments make a lot of money out of wars, and it's very profitable.
The other thing is some people refer to the person and they say, oh, it's the government's person, or they try to act as an agent for that person. It doesn't quite work like that. It's the person is a legal entity which exists due to an association between yourself and other people. It's evidence of a relationship. Now, you can change your relationship and keep your name. Your name doesn't dictate the relationship that exists. And you can't just arbitrarily change your association or your obligations with this other party. You can abandon your association. You can stop associating with them. But if you already owe them, to say, oh, I'm acting as an agent for my person, it's not going to work. Imagine if a man gets married, he goes outside the bounds of marriage for some sex, he gets caught, and then he tries telling his wife, oh, but it wasn't your husband, it was the man. It wouldn't fly. And therefore, our person is evidence of a relationship which exists between us and the people in the government, where we have decided, and according to their paperwork, we have asked them and begged them to treat us like children and take care of all of our stuff. Now, this relationship is evidenced by that person, and that person is the subject of which your rights and your duties and obligations are a part of. It's what defines those. So you can't avoid those just by claiming, oh, I'm not that person, I'm agent for the person. It's ludicrous.
So would you agree that they've created this person to basically make us play their game of commerce?
No, I would argue with the point that they created this person. They didn't create it. It took two people. It took two parties to create the association. There was will and consent on both parties, or at least the appearance of it. And then together, you could say that together you created that relationship. But they did not create the name. They don't own it. It doesn't evidence in and of itself any joinder or obligation or contract.
Uh-huh. Is Rob still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I just wanted to give you a chance to respond instead of just going nuts.
All right. Right, I forgot where we was then, but this is the whole thing, the way I've looked at it with the person and the way some people are trying to tackle it. There's many people out there trying many different processes, and I've tried many different processes myself, up until the point of I've recognised that this system of corruption is with banking elites near enough at the top or making people believe they have to use this system which they manage to control with. And I'm just trying to look for solutions within it. And this is why I come upon your stuff with the free man on the land stuff. And it's got harder and harder to perform on the free man on the land stuff in the past few years, even Dean Clifford got arrested the other week. And people are, even with their phenomenal knowledge on this, I've got many friends that try this out and has got phenomenal knowledge and try many different processes, but they seem to just ignore it in their courts.
Well, power never gives it up easily. I mean, they're not just going to say, oh, yeah, you caught us ripping you off. Here, take back all your money, and incidentally, why don't you use proceeds of crime legislation against me and take my house? They're not going to go easily. The good thing about the free man movement is that I believe we do have the moral and ethical high ground, and that we talk about being peaceful and loving even in the face of their unlawful actions. And I think you're right. I think one of the problems, certainly I can only speak about Canada, but I've heard similar stories throughout the Commonwealth nations, is that our existing courts, I don't want to go so far as to say corrupt, but perhaps hijacked would be a better word, or corroded. And until we do have proper courts where a human being, all human beings are equal, and there are no, is that me?
That's not you. I don't know who somebody pulled somebody into the call, but don't worry.
Excuse me, Dom, that was a caller ringing the station, mate.
If, where was I at?
Carry on, Rob. Where was we at? The solutions to...
My train of thought left the station, and I'm still packing my bags. Yeah, the courts. The courts are either corrupt, corroded, or hijacked. And until we do have proper courts where fictions are not allowed, if you want justice, you need truth. And the moment you allow fictions into your court, you've abandoned truth. Because the Crown told me to do so, or I was agent for the Crown. These are imaginary constructs, and at which time we'd say, okay, well, bring that Crown up, and let's see what it has to say. And if they bring up a Crown, then we tell them, you know what, you're delusional, and you're responsible for your actions, and we hold them accountable.
Well, I know that you do stuff within not just personal solutions, i.e. This is what you can do to empower yourself and see how that system does enslave you. But you're also looking at the bigger picture with actually having a reform for how the police are at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, I try to look at the big picture, 7 generations down the road. What sort of reality are we building for them to enjoy?
Because, this is part of why I do what I do. I've recognised that this is what I believe. That the banking system was created, or I shouldn't say create, that's probably the wrong word, but this game of commerce that is out there, that is played by the person, and that name, people believe that they need that name to live. And they need that signature. That's the most powerful thing in their lives, and they don't realise it, that every time that they're giving that signature over, it's entering them into that game of commerce, which is controlled by them at the top. And I'm just not down with that.
I don't think that we need their name or their permission to engage in commerce. I mean, commerce is just a transaction between two willing people, a lawful transaction. What they've done, though, is they've created a commerce game for their children, for their wards. It's kind of like going to a store. As an adult, you can go to a store, you can do what you want, but if you're a child and you go into the store ordering something, the storekeeper, like in a small town where I grew up, this was back when kids could still buy cigarettes for their parents, my mom would send me to the store with a note or call up the store and say, yeah, my son's coming to pick up some stuff, and I'd be allowed it. But if I went there without her permission, I wasn't allowed it. Now, this was the case until I became an adult. What we have essentially are a whole bunch of adults. All these citizens are actually legally children of the state or wards of the state or children of the province or Maybe in the UK it would be a ward of the council. And that's the legal mechanism that they employ to secure authority as servants over us. That's why they don't they don't treat us like masters. They treat us like they're the masters, and yet they call themselves servants. And that's how they've done it.
It can't be a very fair form of commerce if, let's say that you went into your local supermarket, and what's worth more to you, a lump of silver or a piece of paper with $5 written on it?
Well, it depends, actually. Depends how big the lump of silver is and how much faith I have in the redemption of the note.
And the situation and at the time. But like if you went into like over here with a Tesco superstore with a lump of silver, they're never going to take that at the till as commerce.
No, because their goal is to collect as much silver as possible, and when you bring them a lump of silver like that, you actually make it harder for them. Pieces of paper, electronic transactions, they can turn that into all the silver they want anytime, but what they can't do is electronically file a lump of silver. So from a strictly logical make money perspective, I can see why they would choose to do that.
There was something else I was going to put to you. I think I mentioned it in a comment. What I was going to try and do, because there's many of us out there that are trying to do good in the world, is the way I see it. And there's many people that I talk to that look at this stuff, but they can't see it making a change at all worldwide.
Ask them if they see it making a change if they do nothing. I mean, I already see a change coming now. It's starting now. They're starting to. At first, they laughed at us. Now they're starting to take it seriously. They're aware that, to a large degree, the message itself, even if every judge in the country says no, that's not the case. I liken it to an electrical circuit. Now, let's suppose you touch this electrical circuit, you get a shock. There's no doubt in your mind that there is some electricity there, some sort. So you put a multitester on it, and the multitester reads 0. There's nothing there. At some point, you have to decide either the multimeter is wrong, maybe the batteries are dead, maybe it's broken, or you have to discount your own awareness, your own awareness of your situations. And I think that's what is happening with the free man movement. We look into our hearts, we look into our souls, essentially. We see a fundamental truth resonating there, which speaks to equality and compassion and just being loving towards each other instead of being motivated by greed and money and power and control. And it doesn't matter what these judges say. All it does is causes us to believe the courts aren't working properly because we know it's the truth, because we don't need some judge to tell us what is and is not the truth when it's so plainly written on our hearts. And I think that's what the problem is. The courts, having been hijacked, now do not want people to think that, they need consent.
So what do you think the actual solution is? And a 5-year, 10-year, and 15 or 20-year vision?
Whatever the solution is, unless people first grow up, it's never going to happen. They have to stop dividing themselves and allowing ourselves to be divided based along gender lines, sexual orientation, gender or political affiliations even, or color of our skin. I mean, these are all silly, silly reasons to divide ourselves, and it allows those who then can pick us off. And if all they want is maximum control, maximum wealth, minimum effort, dividing the people who would stand against them would be number one. And we have to stop going to the government who's creating these problems so that they can then impose solutions which benefit them. We've got to stop going to them and expecting them to fix our problems like running to nanny. I mean, there is no nanny to run to. It's up to us to fix it. And we have to take control of our wealth. We have to realize instead of going to nanny and asking for a weekly allowance from our trust fund, we say, no, I want it all. It's mine. and I don't trust you to administrate it properly anymore. I am going to administer my own affairs and my own wealth myself. That has to be first. If we don't do that, nothing else matters. And then if we can get to that point, and I don't know how to make people do that, help people do that even, I think it's happening naturally to a large degree. There's a growing sense of universal consciousness and unity, and I think that's a large part of the growing up process. And then the second thing is our form of government. The idea of electing someone and having them represent us every 4 years is ludicrous in the age of the internet. There is no reason we can't have direct democracy, a people's Congress, where issues are raised, deliberated, determined, and decided, and then we send forth our resolutions, and we say this is the way it's going to be. And we serve the notice on our representatives, on the corporations that they're serving, and we tell them, no, this is our decision, and we cut out the government and the corporations completely from the decision-making process. It should be the people and only the people making the decisions, and they should have all the same level of authority on it. Now, certainly some decisions you will have to leave to the professionals. Whether or not we build a bridge, that should be decided by the people. Whether or not what sort of metal is used in that bridge, that you let the engineers decide.
How do you think they've snuck all this corruption in, and how they're able to do it covertly in the way they do?
Ignorance. They rely on everyone's ignorance. They create confusion. They teach ignorance, essentially. The schools nowadays don't even really teach people how to think, just to remember and regurgitate facts and information. They're not training us to... they're not educating us to think. They're training us to act and to react.
Uh-huh. So, the way I see it, the whole system, everything is upside down, backwards, inside out, twisted. And that's how they've managed to pull this deception upon everybody with this body of words. And it is, they've cast a spell. And they've got their little secret words in their legal books, and they control from their pedestals. But I do actually believe myself that this veil is coming down. I see tenfold of people learning this sort of stuff every year, and they do stuff to attack, especially the people that are going right out there and doing it, to the point of the cars, the homes, their families. And it's great that people carry on doing this, because once you find out how corrupt this system is, I don't know how anybody could turn back personally.
Yeah, and I think part of it, one of the things I try to share with people is that to complain about the situation if you want to fix it, if you want freedom, there's no way to get that without accepting responsibility. And it's up to us to accept as much responsibility for the state of affairs as they are, instead of trying to blame the government and, it's corrupt and it's them doing this. No, it's us. We are the ones who allowed it.
What is freedom?
Yeah, the more responsibility we can accept for the state of affairs, the more power and authority we get over the future. And if you want to make sure that you have no more freedom in the future than you have now, then blame someone for where you are now and watch how that disempowers you. Once you start accepting full responsibility, then you start seeing that there are remedies and paths available to you that simply aren't there when your mind is in the victim mentality.
So what is freedom?
Well, what, you want a definition? Or
yeah, I mean, your opinion, your definition.
Well, I think it would be pretty much along the lines of any standard Webster one. It's the ability to do as you please without restraint from others. And I would caveat and say, provided you're not harming another human being, damaging property, or using fraud in your contracts. I mean, we're facing a situation now where the people in the government are trying to get us convinced that vices are crimes and that they need to protect us from our vices, and therefore they need more money from us to stop us from engaging in these vices. And yet these vices harm no one but ourselves. And yet they're imposing their vices on us and then denying us our vices. And Lysander Spooner had a really good essay on this. I just read it, about whether or not vices can be criminalized and what right anyone has to do that. And the only way legally they could get away with it is if there is a legal relationship between them and us, which puts them in the authority of the parent or the authority of the controller, essentially. And that's what they've done with their legal trickery, is they've deceived us into becoming like their children, like their wards. So legally, from that perspective, then they can do it. They can say, no, you can't do this, you can do this. You have to go to bed at 10, you have to be up at this time. They can do whatever the hell they want because we're the children. And I think what we're seeing now also is this system has been in place for a long time so that people would go comatose to it, and then they slowly start increasing the demands and decreasing the freedoms in the hopes that people don't wake up to it. But the problem is there's always going to be a line, and if you cross it once, that's all there is to it. Once someone wakes up and sees you there, there's no going back to sleep with this information.
That's right. But is there an actual solution to stopping the illusionary authorities taking everything that people perceive that they own off of them?
Yeah, we've got to stop allowing them to claim to be authorities. But no one's going to do that unless they see. I mean, they'll leave the house party when they start playing the polka music, but if it's raining out and there isn't another party to go to, they're just going to stay there and soak it up, and hopefully they'll convince themselves that they can get a new DJ in that party. So the remedy involves a People's Congress where people are discussing these things themselves, but doing it from a rational perspective of what's best for the country, not just from their own selfish perspective, what's best for me in the short term. And that's a big problem, I think, with human nature. Although, again, I see that changing as well. There seems to be a growing global community of like-minded people who just want to enjoy their life on this rock, live free, and not be treated like we're children or idiots or have our vices ruled to be crimes and throw us in jail.
Well, a big vibe that I got off of you was, and this is why I do what I do really, was that you feel that the guys that call themselves police officers, they don't know this stuff, and you feel that they've been duped, and you feel that they need to know this stuff, so they stop enslaving people. Would I be correct in saying that?
Well, yeah, but even then, the mindset of a lot of the police, right or wrong, they're going to do what they're told so that they can get their big fat paychecks. So it's not just a matter of educating them, because some of them wouldn't even give a shit. They wouldn't care at all. I think it's a matter of educating the courts or arguing in the courts and getting the courts to rule in our favor, and then you bring that to the cop and you say, here it is, you're barred from doing this.
Okay, so what would be the tipping point then? Because this has been ongoing, and we've both seen many, many battles within courtrooms, trying many different processes. What do you think would tip it to change how it is?
What do you mean, how is? The whole system and the whole? Well, who knows what the tipping point is? The tipping point could be anything. It could be a butterfly flapping its wings somewhere. I don't know.
Because this is the thing. It's like I'm watching it and I'm enthusiastic. Don't get me wrong, but it's wondering if they're pulling all the strings, absolutely all of them, and they know which angle that any one of us is going to come from.
I think you're giving them far more credit than they deserve. I think for the most part, they're conscienceless people, kind of empty inside. Many of them are probably sociopaths or psychopaths. They're all about the ego trip. Here's where they fail. They never factored in. I mean, if you're fighting an enemy and you are trying to craft a strategy, you can only factor in those things you are aware of and which you understand. If you're crafting a strategy against your enemy and they have machine guns and you have never even seen or heard of a machine gun, you're going to be crafting a strategy that will fail. Their problem is they completely ignore love. They have no idea of its power. They have no idea of its extent, its reach. They have no idea how fast it can spread. They seem to be completely dead to it. And their strategy doesn't take it into account at all. And I think that's why they end up, in the end, they have to fail because of that.
But they're still going to take stuff off of people, aren't they?
Well, maybe so. Maybe that's a good thing. I do this. I have this bit, a comedy bit about people being way too attached to their stuff, anyways. And anytime the government comes at you, they always try to play tug of war with the stuff you're attached to. If you're not attached to it, and then they just left playing tug of war all by themselves, they seem to be more interested in the tug of war because that's how they make their money than by just taking the thing that you're attached to. And I know it's difficult when it's your house or your children or your car or things that you're really attached to. But those attachments, if you want to be a free man, you're going to want to limit those as much as possible anyways. Because your attachment to things is going to enslave you just as much as any of these people.
That's why I think most of the people that go out there on the forefront and do this have witnessed stuff in their own lives that it's affected them to go, I've got to do something about it. And the more and more people that this is happening to, people are realising the way I see it is people do know that we've got corrupt governments, but now they're starting to look for the solutions and what they are for each and every one of us. Well,
imagine if, when the government came and said, you owe me this, you owe me that, I want this, I want that. If we just started laughing at them like they're ludicrous, like who the hell are you? They wouldn't last very long. And so I think the way out of it is just to say no to them. Bullies hate being laughed at. They hate being said no to. I think they're trying to come down now on a lot of the people in the forefront as a way of trying to show people, see, we're serious. We don't care about the law. We care about power, and we aren't letting that power go, and it doesn't matter. But I think that in itself is going to work against their interests, because people are starting to pay attention to it now. And when you start throwing peaceful people in jail because you don't like their politics, the people are going to rise up against that.
Well, it's got to a really silly point where that it's just people enslaving other people with their beliefs and their illusionary authorities. And this goes from the very lowest level.
We're dealing with delusional people. We're dealing with people who rely on delusions to justify engaging in actions which, if it wasn't for this delusion, would be clearly unlawful. And they claim, oh, well, I'm acting for the Crown. I'm acting for the Crown in the right of province of British Columbia. I'm acting for the state, or I'm agent for Regina. Well, show us these people. Show us these things. Bring them into the court. Let's talk to them on the stand. And you'll find, oh, no, we can't do that. And the judge won't even allow you to question this because it's a legal fiction. You're not allowed to question it. And so these things don't even exist. And the moment you start attacking somebody's delusion, especially when they are so invested in it, they will simply attack you. They will commit genocide to maintain their hold on delusions, which they feel entitles them to engage in actions which would otherwise be unlawful. So I think it's a matter of waking people up slowly. I mean, people are waking up. They're starting to realize, wait a minute, there is no state. There's only a bunch of people who are claiming to be the state, agents for the state. They steal from me so that they can attack other people who claim to be agents for the state in some other part of the country. And when you look past when the UK and England in particular has had such a huge impact on human history in this regards. If you go back hundreds and hundreds of years ago when there were warring clan members and kings all over the place, essentially the kings were the people who rose to the top, usually through sociopathy. They were willing to do things that normal-minded people wouldn't do. And because that sociopath would promise not to harm them too much if they taxed, we ended up with a system where the people at the top are almost certainly sociopathic and do not care about us at all. And I don't know why we continue to even vote them into office. I mean, just to want to be the leader of a country like that, to me, is evidence of something wrong with your head. Who the hell wants that much authority and power over their fellow man? Who wants to impose their will on millions of people and claim that, oh, well, I know what's best for you and I get to throw you in jail because I don't like your vices, but you can't do anything to me about my vices. This is a mindset that is what the real danger to humanity is. It's not the people who are smoking pot or traveling down the road without a license and a permit. It's the people who believe they have some sort of divine right to impose their will on their fellow man because a fictional entity, an imaginary being, told them they could. I mean, Santa Claus and the Crown exist in the exact same way. It's just Santa Claus exists in the imagination of children, and the Crown exists in the imagination of men. And
hang on. I'm going to have to do a disclaimer for any children that are listening about Santa Claus. No, carry on, Rob.
Yeah, so these people are pointing to fictions, claiming that these fictions give them power over real things. You're not allowed to question the existence of that fiction. And they claim that, without the fiction, your life would be worse. You would be subject to marauding gangs and you'd have no way to defend yourself. But I don't see that. I mean, if I was in a community and we were being subjected to marauding gangs in Canada, they might get one action in, but we'd be waiting for them the next time. They would not be leaving that town. I mean, you come talk to some of your average hardworking Canadians, they're not going to take any shit from someone like that.
And they deal with it as a community would. Yeah.
I mean, up to, 1850, people didn't have police officers, a standing group. It's a standing army, essentially. And it's an occupying army because they don't care to operate according to the law. I've heard RCMP officers tell me to my face that they were not bound by the criminal code and they could do whatever they want. Now, whether or not someone told them this or whether or not they're just under the impression that, well, we're the ones who bring charges and we don't bring it against ourselves, I don't know. But it's very troubling when you have armed men walking around who point to a body of words which they don't understand and then use this body of words to claim authority over you and are willing to use violence up to the point of inflicting death to try to save you from your own vices. It's ludicrous, but you know what? If you were paying them a dishwasher's salary or a servant's salary, they wouldn't do it, but they're being paid ludicrous amounts of money. I mean, they go on shift and they make $700, $800, $900 in a shift.
So why do the people en masse let this go on?
Well, I don't know. I think you would want to talk to a psychologist for that. I see it because they're comfortable, they're distracted, and it's a whole lot of work to take it on. And they too are deluded. They're into their delusion. The state is real. Oh, there's nothing you can do. You have to pay taxes. There's two things you can't escape: death and taxes. They're all suffering under their own delusions as well. The idea that the state is going to protect them, while at the same time clearly being the party that's most negatively affecting them. I mean, a delusion is a belief which is firmly held in spite of superior evidence to the contrary. They just ignore the evidence, and if you try showing it to them, the first thing that happens, I'm sure you've seen it a lot, is people get angry, and they start calling names, and they start attacking you. Well, you don't want to pay your fair share. This is how people who share, if two people share a delusion and then one wakes up and says, oh, that's just a delusion, I'm not believing in that anymore, the other party will feel personally offended.
Well, this delusional security guard, just the other day, we were filming all the CCTV cameras to see how many there were, and he came and he grabbed my mate and he started throwing him about, and the sort of levels that they'll go to. When some kids saw that the security guard grabbed him, some kids came up and he said, "You're filming kids. You shouldn't be filming kids." And he's radioed for backup and things like that. It's just like, you can see the sort of levels it will go to.
Oh, yeah. The tyrants always point to the kids, eh? It's always for the kids' safety. It's always for the community safety. In Ontario, the OPP are talking about making the communities as safe as possible. But what they don't realize is we don't want crazy communities, but we don't want a safe community imposed upon us by people who we then end up fearing, and our community is made non-safe by these protectors. I mean, in World War II, millions of people put their lives on the line. They abandoned their own safety in order to secure for us certain rights and freedoms. And now these police officers expect us to give up these rights and freedoms for our own safety. And I think that's ludicrous.
So are you feeling safe yet?
What's that?
Are you feeling safe?
Well, the more they try to make me safe, the more I fear for myself. It's them who make me feel unsafe. I mean, I've been traveling down the road and have 100 Hells Angels on motorbikes behind me, and I have no concern at all about that. I give them a nice wave and show them a peace sign, and a cop behind me like that, and suddenly I'm a little bit concerned. Are they going to try pulling me over? Is there going to be a conflict? I mean, I've never had conflict with motorcycle gang people. Well, maybe one. But loads of conflict with these cops who claim that they have authority over me because some imaginary entity said they weren't subject to the law.
There's two more things I want to touch upon. One is Meads versus Meads, and the other is Occupy. So take your pick. Which one do you want first?
I guess Meads versus Meads.
Okay, Meads versus Meads. Right, for people that do not know what Meads versus Meads is, it's a piece of paper that's been passed around and was written up by was it a Canadian judge?
Well, he's an Associate Chief Justice of the Court of Queen's Bench in Alberta. And there was a divorce case where someone tried using Freeman principles, and they weren't applicable at the time because the guy ended up, I mean, I don't want to go into the whole marriage thing, but when you get married, you're not marrying your wife. You're marrying the state, and the state is existing between you and your wife. And once you enter into their sandbox, once you enter into that contract, you're not going to get out of it by saying, oh, I'm a free man. Sorry, you stepped into it. This is your association. This is your relationship. These are your rights and your duties. So unless you're arguing that that association, that relationship was fraudulent on ab initio, you're going to be bound until you get out. I mean, you can't voluntarily enter into someone's home, entering in, agree to the rules, and then once you're there, say, screw it, I don't like the rules, I'm just going to break them. If you come into my home and I say there's no smoking, and you say, well, I want to smoke, well, then leave the home. But to start smoking in the home after you've agreed that there would be no smoking, and if I caught you smoking that I could have your shoes, well, to say, okay, well, I can smoke and you can't have my shoes, that's a childish way to look at it. And Meads versus Meads, this guy went off the chart. I don't know if he's got a little fly in his bonnet himself, whether he's insane or what. He recently on the bench claimed that he doesn't need people's consent to govern them. The guy is just so full. When I read I read the whole thing, what I sensed was hubris and fear is from what I got from that. And this guy, if you look online, you can Google him, look him up, you'll find a picture of him in the Edmonton Sun from about a year and a half, 2 years ago. They had a court open public house, or an open house, where members of the public went there on like a Saturday and were talking, and there was some articling, law students giving them a tour. And this Associate Chief Justice decides to stand in the lobby of the courthouse, and the word bullying was used, but he's talking about needing $300 million for a new courthouse, that for them to continue providing the services, that they need $300 million. And then in the Meads versus Meads ruling, he states that they are completely independent and not dependent upon the state or individuals. And yet here they are asking the individuals and the state to pony up $300 million for them. And you know what I think? When I don't want to be crude or anything, but he is just an arrogant potato-eating Irishman. He looks like Mr. Potato Head, for Christ's sake. If you look at a picture of him, he looks just like Mr. Potato Head.
I'm not going to comment because I've not seen it, for one. But that Meads versus Meads is a document basically trying to defame anybody trying any kind of legal, lawful process.
And the thing is,
if people look at it, you can learn so much from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because
there was a lot there that he just glossed over, like some of the stuff I'm working on, and he would just gloss over it, and he didn't want to touch that. Plus, all of the reasons. I mean, the man clearly engaged in defamation. He called me a con man, a parasite, and a guru, using the term guru in the negative sense with con man and parasite. Clearly, it's not being used in a positive sense as teacher, more along the lines of someone who is manipulating the naive is the connotation that has. And the guy engages in these defamatory actions, and I'm going to try suing him. The thing is, he might decide to try to claim that he has a thing called absolute privilege. Now, the problem with it, absolute privilege, it's supposed to allow people, whether or not they're a judge or a defendant or a plaintiff or anyone in a court case, during the course of the proceedings, they're supposed to be able to be free to say whatever they want, and even if they're malicious in their intent, it's still not an actionable offense. Now, the key thing to this, it has to be during the proceedings. So I started looking into that, and what I found was the proceedings, there's a couple of decisions on it, where it refers to the fact that the proceedings, whether or not something is in the course of the proceedings, is whether or not it's acting according to the procedure. Now, the purpose of the procedure is to ensure that there is due process. And the due process is to ensure that there's the appearance of fairness in the courts. Now, this man, he releases these reasons. I wasn't even in that trial. I had no knowledge about it. And if they try claiming that it's absolute privilege because he's a judge, therefore he can say whatever he wants, the thing is, it wasn't during the proceedings. It was after he had brought the gavel down, he had closed up shop, and then he went and made his decision, and then he went and released reasons for his decision. Now, if it's all about being the court procedure, and that procedure is for the purpose of ensuring that there is due process, then in this case, he has denied me and a number of other people any due process whatsoever. So you can't deny due process and then claim that the reason you have the right to do that is to protect due process. And the other thing is that the absolute privilege is applicable during the course of proceedings when you're dealing with people within that court case. Imagine for a moment that I go there, I'm in this action, and the court rules, no, he enjoys absolute privilege. Well, then I get to say, fine, then I enjoy absolute privilege too during the course of these proceedings, and that means after the proceedings, I can release my reasons for action, or how about during the proceedings when we're adjourned for the day, I can go outside, pass out pamphlets, say whatever I want about any third party, and then I can claim, no, I'm covered because it was just part of the court proceedings, absolute privilege. If I don't enjoy absolute privilege in that case, then the judge doesn't enjoy absolute privilege in this case. So one of the things I want to do is test these courts to determine whether or not they are corrupt, corroded, or hijacked, and that's the first test, is to bring action to him. Because in his reasons, towards the end of his reasons, he extends an invitation. I'll look for it here. He extends an invitation to the gurus, and he refers to me as the guru. He invites us to court and say, you'll get a fair trial, you'll get a fair hearing. Now, in order for that to be the case, we all have to be treated equally, so I'm going to sue him and see whether or not he says, absolute privilege, you can't touch me, in which case we know that he is corrupt. We know this because he is not employing the defense of truth. So that means he knows that when he was when he was writing his reasons, he was lying in his reasons. Otherwise, he would have the defense of truth available to him. So if he doesn't try using that, then we know at least that man is in fact a corrupt potato-eating potato head.
So what gets me about this, we recognise the corruption and common law no harm, no loss, no fraud. But when you're saying you're suing them, you'll have to take them to court in their court.
Well, no, he's in Alberta, and I filed my action in the Supreme Court of British Columbia.
And what's that? The Crown?
No, it's the Court of Inherent Jurisdiction in British Columbia. It's the highest court, with the exception of the appeal court.
But do they, like, if you're going to court within their system, do they not get energy from that somehow?
Well, I understand that, but also, I mean, there is, if you're looking for remedy and you say, okay, well, I have to go to court. Oh, no, I don't want to go to court because it won't happen there. I mean, you're giving up the fight because you think the ref is going for the other player. But even imagine it's a boxing match and the ref wants the other guy to win. You just have to be a better fighter and knock him out, and there's nothing the ref can do about it. He might try to sway the decisions one way or another. He might try to impede you and hinder you like he does at the other party, but a knockout is a knockout. And one of the things is that we're doing this with a great deal of public awareness and public witness. And so if they do rule against me, then I still win. I still got the evidence that I was looking for, because I'm looking to test them, to evaluate them. I'm not going in there with, as I'm going in there as a scientist, not as an entrepreneur who wants a specific outcome. I don't really care what the outcome is. I want the information. And if they rule that, oh no, the judge is covered and this is absolute privilege, then I get to engage in very similar actions and claim that it is absolute privilege. And this just calls the administration of justice into disrepute. And if enough people are watching it, part of this action, he's not the only guy I'm suing. I'm also suing 3 other people, identities as yet unknown, who have been defaming me. They said the exact same things. So now if I go to court and I prove that these 3 people are guilty of defamation, they were in communication of some level with this judge or the justice, he repeated what they had to say, they're found guilty, but he's not, for no other reason than he's a judge. You know what image comes to mind? A pig on a ladder changing the letters on the side of a barn. And people are just going to start questioning the legitimacy of these courts if that's what they allow. So I'm thinking, plus I'm a pretty sharp cookie when I want to be. I've got enough of a name that they would realize that any fancy footwork on their part might actually harm them. I can go on YouTube and say, well, I was in court today and this is how I got railroaded. I mean, I can get extraordinarily creative in my lawful responses to their corruption. But as I said, I'm wondering if they aren't hijacked. And if they're hijacked, then they're hostages, and we go in there not trying to attack the judge, but trying to free the judge. So a lot of people, they go into court and they think, oh, it's a false thing, and they start attacking the judge himself. It's like stepping into a boxing ring and trying to beat up the referee, and then your opponent is going to be there saying, see, Judge, I told you he's unreasonable. And it will appear that you are. You have to understand who your target actually is. And just because the judge might try to push you, test your buttons, and get you riled up, you don't rise and take the bait. And if you do, you're going to say, oh, well, the judge wasn't impartial, and it's corrupt, but maybe he was just pushing your buttons to determine how emotionally competent you were. And if you don't realize that the judge isn't your enemy in there, that your opponent is your enemy, you're wasting all your energy on the judge.
So, right, we're coming up to the hour, Rob. So the main things are, like, just do not comply to this corrupt system. But can you top it off with, because I've never talked to you before, and I know you went to the Occupy movement in Canada.
Yeah, and what
that was a very interesting thing for me, Occupy was. So can you tell me what you got from Occupy?
Well, when I went there and I looked around and I saw thousands of different people with hundreds of different issues, and they're all just clamoring for their issue alone to be fixed and addressed first, like theirs is the most important one. And what I realized that all of these problems, they all stem from 5 basic problems. And if we could address those, we've got to deal with the disease, not just address the symptoms. And whether you're a student arguing about high interest rates on your student loan, a retired person arguing, complaining about your dwindling pension, a small business owner concerned about rising red tape, all of these things, they all point back to the same 5 basic things. And what I saw was they might not like it, I saw a bunch of children. I mean, holy crap. When do they learn that standing there with words on a sign, a placard, does nothing except just absorb your energy? It doesn't direct it properly. And you're protesting, and legally protesting means to accept unhappily. So when you go and you protest some legislation, you're not saying I reject this. You're saying I accept it, but I'm unhappy about it. What the hell?
Where's that definition come from? I love that.
It's in, you look at commercial law, it's when it dealing with...
accept unhappily.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, carry on. Because this is the whole thing I was trying to point out to the protesters. All they're doing is putting their names down on a rebellious database.
Yeah. And I don't know, what I saw is a need for people to grow up and realize that their individual symptom is in fact tied to their neighbor's symptom, and that they shouldn't be fighting with their neighbor about who gets limited resources to address their particular issues. The other thing is a People's Congress. There's no sense, like the Idle No More movement over here now is getting big, or it was getting big. There's no sense complaining to the government to fix it. We've got to grow up and say, listen, government, you've caused enough problems. We're cutting you out of the circle. We're fixing this ourselves. Yeah, we don't need your help anymore. Thank you very much. And we need a People's Congress to do that. Once we have a People's Congress, we are then lawfully in a position to convene our own People's Courts. They would operate extraordinarily similarly like the existing ones, except there would be no fictions. It's just human beings. So if you get assaulted by a cop, the fact that he's a cop would have no bearing whatsoever. And if someone said, well, why did you do this? And he says, well, I was ordered to do it by the Crown. And the Crown doesn't exist. We say, well, bring in the Crown. We want to talk to the Crown, whoever they are. Oh, well, it's just an imaginary entity. It doesn't actually exist. It's a legal fiction. Well, then, sorry, Mr. Billy Bob there. You're completely responsible for your actions, and you're caught left playing hot potato. You've been doing this your entire career, and we use the forfeiture of property or proceeds of crime. And we take everything that they've ever been given, and we say, sorry, pal, you were obeying orders from human beings who were pointing to imaginary entities and claiming that these imaginary entities gave you carte blanche to break the law. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Now, once we have our own courts, we then require people to enforce the will of those courts. So I would see a need for, and I think every adult in every community who is of sound mind should in fact swear an oath to become a peace officer to preserve and maintain the public peace, so that they do enjoy that status, and then that way they can enforce the will of the people's courts. And once we get to that point, then the next issue is money. And unless we are putting money into circulation without any interest attached, whatever remedy we try to bring, it won't last 20 years. The bankers will just print more money, assign more interest, and burden us further. So we've got to get back control of our money supply.
I'm down with that. I'm down with that totally. No interest tied to the money. And until then, stop registering your kids would be a good idea.
Yeah. Hey, do I have a moment to plug my new upcoming show?
You can do whatever you like, Rob.
Okay, well, you can find it at robmernard.com or robertmernard.org, and it's called Freemaniteria. I'm not quite sure when our first broadcast is going to be. I've got my tech crew working on that, but likely within the next week or two, and it's going to be it's kind of like a variety type radio show where it's going to be part radio show so that people who don't want to watch the video can just listen in. But then it will also have some video aspects, kind of like the Joe Rogan Experience meets the Daily Show.
Would you believe me if I said I don't know either of them?
Well, then I think we're done talking now, Dom.
All right, brilliant, Rob. Brilliant. I'm going to look into Joe Rogan and the Daily Show after this and find out what the hell they are. But Rob,
it's joerogan.net, and the guy he's a comedian, an actor, and a very intelligent man, and he's got a pretty good show. It's kind of fun the way their discussions go all over the place.
Rob, I probably know exactly who he is, but I'm terrible with names. I've even lost my own. So,
right.
The thing is, I probably do know. I've probably seen his stuff. It rings a bell, the name, but terrible with names myself. But Rob, love you for what you do, and we're gonna go.
Cheers, Dom. Thanks for having me on, eh?
All right, yeah, top man.
Peace and freedom to all the people in the
Radio,
UK, man.
All sorts going on Darkcity
Cheers.
Radio.
It's a matter of importance to me that you be lucid and aware of what you're able to be. Since I was able to see the lack of limits, I've been infinite, and this is indiscriminate. Isn't narcissistic. Arson isn't always meant to be destructive, it's an art form. This is my attempt to start the fire that makes you art more, and logic less, cause logic since the dollar has been off of it. I'm offering a sentence that could bring you back to sanity. Empathic but emphatically, I plan to see you mastering the art of your existence so that everyone can benefit. Then on and fractally it blossoms into everything, and mindfully we intervene, i.e. create reality. I used to hate this word, but now I know its definition, and I've learned to trust my family. I see all 7 billion, so I deem it time to DMT you all with my opinion, and I pray to my creators that just one of you will listen, cause the light and divine truth was always inside you. I'm here to remind you that you